What's up? This is Chris Tomson from Dams of the West, and you're live in Limbo.
Tell the truth, keep your word, promise something and deliver it. You're not bulletproof, that's a certain, no one is, you're no different.
I'm Sheena from Live in Limbo, and I'm with Chris of Dams of the West. Hi, Chris. Welcome
Hello.
to Toronto.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Had a good drive from Montreal. Drove past like 25 Tim Hortons from between the highway and here. So
Very
I'm feeling very Toronto right now.
Excellent. So a lot of people know you from Vampire Weekend.
That's true.
All right, so tell us about the new album, Youngish American, and embracing being a young-ish American.
Yeah. Well, the origin story of this album comes from when I arrived home after the Modern Vampires tour ended. I was, excuse me, I was newly post 30, newly married, and the proud owner of a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So those three things, while not unique to me by any stretch, I thought sort of there was a convergence of things that made me to go along with sort of the more like visual age turn from the 2-decade to the 3-decade, is when I arrived home, and that was a lot of the thoughts I was thinking. And I knew that Vampire Weekend had a long stretch of time off coming up, and I wasn't professionally qualified to do anything else other than music, and I didn't feel like going back to school for an engineering degree or something. So I sort of sat down and instead of, I don't know, running away or sort of ignoring the things that I was really thinking about, I thought it would be way more worthwhile to sort of lean into it and see if there were songs that were worthwhile and that would be interesting that coming from those thoughts.
And so would you say it developed quickly, or it was a project for many, many years?
I would say sort of the musicality and worldview is ongoing and almost a 33-year-old project probably, but the sort of the specific of this album of Dams of the West, it probably took me about 3 months of staring at a piano, not really accomplishing anything before sort of getting what I envisioned as sort of like just like a little foothold of like a mountain climb or something, like the first foothold that once I sort of got started and sort of, oh, this is interesting, this kind of writing this way kind of sounds like how I think, and when I sing it, it sort of feels like me and it feels honest or authentic or something. That once that sort of clicked in, then a lot of stuff came pretty quickly actually. But that was also like over 2 years ago. So from that point to this point, it's taken a while, but that's also somewhat natural in terms of, all of the steps that you have to take to having songs that you think are good, and then having recordings that you think are good, and so on and so forth.
And how does starting a solo career differ from starting a career with a band?
I can only speak to my specific experience, which means you're a bit older. And it's in some ways it's logistically easier if you're in a successful band, just because you know people, you have industry stuff that you know and have connections to and all that. But for me anyways, especially as the drummer, an oft overlooked subset of a band, or made fun of or dismissed, or however you so choose to put it, I'd say a lot of those 3 months where I was sitting staring at the piano was me sort of trying to figure out if I had anything actual to say or to contribute, because I think that it would be a disservice to Vampire Weekend and the stuff that we've accomplished together in the past and the stuff that I believe we will accomplish in the future to just sort of like, well, I'm going to put out an album. I feel like that wouldn't be, I don't know, just kind of be like a little dick. Like we put this like 10 years of hard work, and then I'm going to just like shuffle out some, can you curse?
Sure.
Shuffle out some bullshit, but so, yeah. So I think that, that was the biggest mental process of like figuring out, is this something that's worth doing? Is this something that's worth like calling on these connections and whatever to like put myself out there and go out and promote and do interviews with Live in Limbo in Toronto, and and like 2 years after this starts. And yeah, and eventually, I got to that place and took a bit of work, and some of the songs are almost explicitly about that, even if it's somewhat opaque. But yeah, so I'd say it's depending on how you look at it, it's easier or harder.
And when I listen to the album, I can really hear your influences in Vampire Weekend's older albums, the drumming and the rhythmic influences. So what was it like taking on a singer-songwriter role for the first time? Or how did that change everything?
Well, I would say that, most of my contributions to Vampire Weekend were purely rhythmic, except I might add, my one big hook, those Hayes and A-Punk? That was me.
Oh.
But that was kind of it. So yes, so I mean, my approach to like contributing to Vampire Weekend was like, trying to come up with a part, and sometimes Rawson would have a drum part already, and like, I would work with that or just play it as he had written it. So this was very different in terms of trying or having to take care of each piece of the puzzle, as opposed to just like the one, and then once that was done, like, I was off or something. I think it makes sense that you can hear some Vampire Weekend rhythmic stuff, because I haven't taken any lessons since then. So I pretty much have the same conception and approach to rhythm and what is interesting. Although some of these drum parts were actually written on like a MIDI keyboard.
Okay.
Like the Tell the Truth one, for instance, on the chorus especially.
The one that goes across your chest.
Not a MIDI, not a guitar.
Not a
I was just in my basement, like using like a keyboard to play drums on, on Logic or whatever. So a lot of them, some of them are a little bit more like steady, and that's because I was just sort of like pounding on a keyboard to come up with drum parts. But but there are some that are sort of more classic Vampire Weekend approach.
Okay. And some people might think this is your second musical endeavor, but it's actually your third. You were in a hip hop group.
Oh, kind of. That's true in a Wikipedia sense, as in that it's there. But I think having lived through it, you're talking about Lome Run, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lome Run, for those who haven't done their Wikipedia research, was a sort of a rap. I think of it as a duo of Ezra of Vampire Weekend fame and our friend Andrew, who I just ran into this on the street the other day in LA. I haven't seen him in a decade. Andrew Collegian. He's now an English professor. Shout out. Anyways, they like Ezra made some beats, and they were rapping over it. And my entree into the band was I had access to a PA.
Oh, wow.
So they wanted to put on a show, and I was like, oh, yeah, I can hook up a PA. So I was sort of like, I would get a little nod, and I would hit spacebar on the beats on the computer.
Okay.
And from there, it sort of snowballed into then I would play bass with the beats, and then one guitar solo, and sort of. So I think by the end, I was probably a full member, but I certainly did not rap.
See, but you're good at like the one finger music contributions.
Yes, starting and ending beats when they should be started and ended.
But you do have over 500,000 views on YouTube, so maybe it's something you shouldn't have let go.
You know what? I'm available to start and stop beats for the right fee.
And what was working with Patrick Carney of the Black Keys like? How did that come about for this album?
Well, the idea came about when Vampire Weekend's bassist Chris Baio was visiting my house, and I was playing some demos, and he just kind of said, oh, you know who'd be good for this? Patrick Carney. And I hadn't really thought about that part yet, and it just so happened I was watching the Netflix cartoon show BoJack Horseman.
So good.
And I hadn't realized previously, but Patrick had done the theme song for that cartoon show. So, and I had been watching, I was like, man, this theme song's really cool. And then after Baio had said that, I saw his name. I was like, oh, these like two data points from disparate sources. Why don't I like try to reach out? So essentially I got his email, which he has a very good email, which I won't divulge. It's a good email though. I essentially wrote him and sent him a couple of demos and said, hey man, like, I'm not really sure what to do with this. I have these songs I think are pretty good. I'm into working on them. Like, what do you think? And then and this was sort of a foreshadow of how we would work together. He said, yeah, sounds cool. Let's do it. I've got 2 weeks off in November. You want to come down to Nashville is where it came down. But he had a very good way throughout the whole process of where I would sort of get hung up if left to my own devices. I would have gotten hung up on various self-doubt or neuroses or just like overthinking, getting tweaky sort of stuff. And he would just kind of be like, oh, just do it. In a way that you sort of forget, oh, right, you can just do something. It's not, you don't have to like overthink everything. So yeah, I had a great time. It's hard for me to imagine a better person producer
And
to have worked on this first thing.
A fellow drummer
He's a fellow
and producer.
Yeah, well, I originally met him. So I lied to you. I originally met him in the Drummer Bro Union. We have a yearly meeting in Trenton, New Jersey.
Okay.
And we talk about our insurance rates and the different group discounts we get. No, I mean, I wish that was true, actually. But I would say, yes, we were fellow drummer bros. So there were actually a number of times when we didn't have to have a conversation.
Right.
Because we understood each other in some way, where we had a similar experience even in different bands.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. All right. Well, you play tonight at Lee's Palace.
Pumped.
And who you're playing with?
Black Joe Lewis and the Honey Bears.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Sheena for Live in Limbo. Thank you.